Good, good, good.
Okay, so I guess we'll kickstart. Hi everyone, I'm Michelle. I'm the Business Development Specialist at Sologic. Welcome to our bi-weekly webinar. Today we're gonna discuss what does a good RCA look like, and it's hosted by our president, Brian Hughes. As mentioned, we do this every 2 weeks, so feel free to sign up for all our future webinars. We appreciate your attendance. We love feedback. I'll be the moderator for this webinar, so feel free to ask your questions, share your feedback in the chat or QA. I'll be interrupting Brian as needed to share these feedback. All right, so Brian, take it away.
All right. Yeah, thanks, Michelle. And you can interrupt me anytime too if you have questions, if you think that I need to illustrate something a little bit further, but cool. Welcome everybody. Thanks for showing up today. This is great. We actually had a lot of registrants for this particular webinar, which shows that it's a topic that I think a lot of people are interested in. And it's something that comes up in class also. You think about when people are doing their RCAs, they want to do a good job, but they don't know what good looks like. And so I think that's really the subject of what we're going to talk about today is what does a good RCA look like? What are the components of a good RCA? And how do we know when we've done a decent job? Or if we are providing feedback, what kind of feedback might we provide to somebody? What looks good? What could be a little bit better? And so we're going to talk about all that stuff today. And as always, you can get in touch with either Michelle or me by reaching out to us via email, or I also sent an email to all of you just a little while ago, so you can get in touch with me via cell phone or WhatsApp or text me, or I don't know, LinkedIn would be great, whatever. But if you need to talk about this subject in further detail, maybe you want us to host this subject internally to a seminar to your team, whatever. We're certainly available to you, and our goal is for you to learn. And I thought it would be fun to start off with our mission statement. We put this together maybe about a year and a half ago now, where and it's really holding up. So I think it's been a successful effort. But our goal is to create a world of solution seekers with the ability to navigate uncertainty with confidence. And certainly this webinar today is in alignment with that mission. And we want to be a definitive place for people to find solutions and then also to prevent problems. And these webinars, like Michelle said, we're trying to make them content rich. We're trying to make them useful. We're trying to make it all about you and make sure that we're answering questions that you have, and doing it in the best way that we possibly can. So that's that. And if you have more questions about this, we want to hear them. If you have other questions that you think that we should address in a webinar or a paper or whatever, then we want to know those too, because we want to make sure that we're producing content that you're going to find useful. And okay. I would also say just one more thing. We are recording this, so we're going to post this. We post all of our webinars on the website. You can go back and rewatch them. You can share them with others, whatever it is. For whatever reason, there it is. We also use these webinars as a subject for blog entries. I will write a blog entry between now and next Wednesday when we'll publish it on our website. That blog entry will be largely around this. It'll be without the non-words and the flubs and any mistakes, because I'll actually have time to sit and write it and kind of, think about exactly how I want to say it, right? So we'll post that on the website. And we do that in a couple of different ways. We do that on the site itself, but also in a way that you can download and distribute. So lots of great ways to get content. All that content is supposed to be helpful to you. La da da da, whatever. And hopefully you find it useful. And at this point, maybe what we can do is just jump into material. So what does a good RCA look like? And I was thinking of an analogy, and it's like, there's the process of an RCA. In other words, if you walk into the kitchen and you're like, well, what are you doing, Brian? What do you got going on today? And I tell you, I'm baking a cake, and you watch me do it. you watch me organize my ingredients. You see me get the recipe out. I don't know if you can see it, but look, there's a recipe book right there. Uh, I'm getting everything squared around, everything's in shape, and it's the process of baking the cake. And you could say, man, that looks good, meaning the process of baking. Brian, your process is looking pretty neat. Or maybe you've got some suggestions for me or ideas for me to make it better. And the same is true with RCA. The process of RCA can look good, and there are good things about that. And so when you're deciding or when you're making a judgment about what a good RCA looks like, I definitely want to talk a bit about what process looks like when it looks good, maybe when it could use a little assistance. But then, of course, you got the cake, and it's after the fact, right? And so when you're looking at this thing, and it's like, well, how do I know when it's done? How do I know if it's okay? Can I actually serve it and be proud about it, or maybe I need to toss it in the trash and try to do better next time? So I definitely want to talk about the output as well. So hopefully this analogy holds water and it makes sense, because if you're talking about what a good RCA looks like, well, you're talking about, the process, and is it looking good? You're looking at the output. How does that look? How does it taste? And then I also, as I was pulling this analogy together, I thought, well, geez, what does a good RCA sound like is also, I think, a very relevant question, because the goal of an RCA is to learn, is to figure out why and how something happened. And typically we're looking at events, right? So how did this event come to be? How did this come to pass? And so the output from that can be an explanation, a verbally delivered explanation or a presentation like this webinar. And so I thought, well, geez, I'm using more than just my visual senses here to determine whether or not the RCA was good. I'm also listening and hearing what it sounds like and hearing, does it make sense? Is it cohesive? Is it coherent? And if I close my eyes, can I visualize what went on? And is that useful to me? So I think that these are the questions that we're trying to answer over the next hour or so. So hopefully that makes sense. Uh, those who are frequent visitors to our webinars know that I really like this phrase. The goal is to put the learning first. I If you had come to me maybe 20 years ago, because I've been doing this now for quite a long time, longer than 20 years, but I've always loved it, and I've always been interested in RCA and organizational learning. And there's a time when I was pretty new at all of this stuff. And I would have told you that it's really important for you to put process first. That process leads to good outcomes. And I do still believe that for sure. But what I've found over the years in facilitating literally at this point hundreds of learning events, RCAs, FMEAs, whatevers, when you're trying to figure something out, is that when you use process as a facilitator, you have that in your back pocket, and you recognize, when do I apply that and when do I back off on that? When do I push it? When do I pull it? What you're doing there is you're using process to help your group of folks that you're facilitating learn. And if they're learning, then you're doing the right thing. Okay. So I think it's really, really important, because I would have told myself, if I could tell myself 20 years ago, dude, don't be so caught up on process and right versus wrong. And hey, we don't do that. We do this, or we do this and we don't do that, that sort of thing. I think the goal, or the measure as to whether or not the RCA or the learning event is effective is ask the participants, are you learning? Are we learning? And is that learning useful? And I think then that basically determines whether or not, if I can go back here, the cake's worth eating, so to speak. All right. So I think it's important to say that out up front. Okay, but what I'm going to do now is I am going to jump into process. And because when we're talking about what does a good RCA look like? What does a good RCA sound like? What does the process of RCA look like when it's going well? Well, we better start out and understand what that is. Some of you may not be familiar with the Sologic process of RCA. We have 5 steps. Step 1, gather and manage data. Step 2 is to write the problem statement. Step three is to analyze cause and effect. Step four is to generate solutions. And step five is to write the final report. These are in order for a reason. Gathering and managing data is kind of like the ingredients. So we put that up front because we want to make sure that we have fresh ingredients for whatever it is that we're going to be baking or cooking off. And but then problem statement. What is it that we're working on? What is the problem we're trying to solve here? What is the thing that the team is focused on, or what's the event that the team is focused on and trying to figure out? Analyzing the causes. Well, how did that event come to pass? And we analyze that through the lens of cause and effect. And at Sologic, we use a very specific sort of cause and effect logic, and I'll get into that in a few slides. But it helps us understand, how did this turn out the way that it turned out? And that can be good, bad, or otherwise. But we're using the lens of cause and effect relationships to sort of understand how the event came to be. And then after we have a good understanding of what caused the event to happen or the problem, whatever, then we come up with a list of solutions. Those solutions are actions that we're going to take. We're going to do something. And what we're going to do is try to control whether or how the event happens in the future. I think it's a common sort of maybe misnomer for people to think that we do RCA to keep events from happening again. When you think about it, kind of you get real technical. No event can happen again. Okay, every event is unique and has a unique point in history, a unique series of, I guess, ingredients and circumstances brought that event to pass. So if I smash my thumb with the hammer as I'm putting together some project out in the garage yesterday, well, I can understand the causes of that. Maybe some of those causes are going to be helpful for coming up with solutions to keep me from doing that again. But the thing is that those circumstances will never line up exactly the same way again in the future. And so what I'm getting at here, and maybe not explaining as eloquently as I would like, is that when we're putting solutions in place right now, what we're trying to do is shape the future. That's risky. That literally involves risk, and that's because it involves uncertainty. Because the farther away you get from this very moment, the harder it is to predict exactly what's going to happen. That said, our solutions sort of need to do that, right? So, a good solution is going to be one that is effective at, I guess, sort of creating a more resilient future around the type of event that we are trying to control. Right? So there's that step there. And then, of course, we need to wrap all this stuff up into some kind of a report that we then share with other people, because others may very well find it interesting what it is that we learned. And so those are the 5 steps of our process. I am going to dig a little deeper into each one of them. And if you've never been to a Sologic class before, well, it looks like this, and we do this over a couple days, maybe 3 days, where we are discussing these in great detail and then also applying it to real life circumstances so that you can see how it applies. Okay, so I'm gonna jump back up out of the slide for just a second, and I want to say to those of you that may not be Sologic users or may never have come to a Sologic training class before, this is our process, but if you have a process that works, we're not dogmatic. What works for you is great. And so if you've made certain adjustments here, things that you've got your own sort of I guess riff on process, or maybe you do a couple other steps, or maybe you follow a different process, that's just fine. Everything that I'm saying to you is, I think, going to be relevant. And I think it's going to be hopefully universal and not just specific to Sologic, such that if you don't use Sologic, you don't know Sologic, that what we talk about here isn't going to be useful to you. So my goal is that this will sort of have a universal utility, and but I'm going to do it in the lens of the Sologic method, and I'm not going to be talking about anything else. So hopefully that's cool. I also want to show you a little bit about how we incorporate human and organizational performance, because I know I got some hop friends on the line today. And a big goal of mine, ever since I was introduced to hop, is to really learn, what the heck are those folks saying? And then also, how does it incorporate with what it is that we're doing? How can it make our process stronger or better or more resilient? And really, I would say to you that a good RCA requires in some form or fashion that you incorporate these hop principles. And the reason is because it sets up the conditions by which people can work together to try to learn from each other, to try to do all this process that I just explained. And so I want to make sure that my hop friends know that we really we buy into this in terms of setting up the right conditions for learning. And we think that we bring special, I guess, a special dish to the potluck, right? Where we add some process here that helps keep that learning on track and moving forward so that you're focusing on the right things at the right time. And the combination of these things is the subject of an ebook that's on our website that you can download for free. And I firmly believe that the combination of hop plus an advanced to modern RCA method like Sologic is definitely where it's at. Okay, so keeping all this in mind, what does a good RCA look like? Well, let's start out with evidence. Evidence is, and if you've been on the evidence, my evidence webinars before, you know that I like this slide. I love fresh ingredients, and I love the analogy of a fresh ingredient to a good, fresh piece of evidence. High quality evidence, I think, is super important because it helps ensure that your learning event, your team, the kinds of conclusions you're coming up with, and the kinds of questions you're asking, the solutions you come up with, geez, like it's got to be based in fact. It's got to be based in reality, and as much as is possible. Okay, so the analogy here is that if you gather fresh ingredients, that the output of your cooking event is going to be better as a result. I think that's universally true. Um, that said, evidence, what we're looking for when we're talking about evidence, we're looking for, the kinds of evidence that people provide. People are great sources of evidence. We're also looking at hardware, software, and systems. So those things that those people are interacting with, right? And then procedures. How are they interacting with those things and understanding that? And then also, what's the environment in which all of this is taking place? And so this is sort of a categorical based model for us identifying sources of good evidence, evidence that helps us understand, evidence that helps us understand or that makes sure that we're dealing in the world of fact and not fiction as much as we possibly can. Okay. And there are varying quality levels of evidence. And this is one way that you can tell that whether the RCA is good or not. If your evidence is shoddy or missing, or maybe there's not very much of it, that doesn't mean that the RCA is going to be bad. However, it does not inspire confidence, honestly, from a person like me looking from the outside. So let's say a student sends me an RCA and they're like, "Hey, tell me what you think about this." Well, the first place I go is to the evidence, and I want to see what they got, and I want to see what they're working with. And you know what? It very well may be the case that they have more evidence than they're showing me, but that talks to me a little bit about the process and how seriously they're taking the process of documentation. Because if they did have good evidence, but it's not listed in the RCA, I kind of think then that that's a gap that needs to be plugged, because they're not really taking into account the consumer of the work that they're doing, are they? Because if they were, they'd include the good evidence that was there so that they would anticipate that I'm going to have questions about, well, you're telling me all these things. These are conclusions that you're coming up with. What is the basis? How did you come up with these conclusions? And how I I'm sorry, I got distracted by Aaron here talking about the price.
No, I
The
was
price
gonna
of
mention it, but the slide has already passed.
Well, I know. Okay, yeah. So clearly, Aaron, a very this is the evidence. This is evidence, Michelle, right? At least one person is paying attention, and that person is Aaron. We got to put Aaron's name down. We have to send him something special. I don't know what it is, but we're going to come up with something for you, Aaron. It might be a carrot, a fresh carrot at US prices for free. We'll send it to you for free. Maybe not. It's probably illegal to send carrots through the mail. Anyway, my point here is that listen, if the evidence isn't high quality and if you're not documenting it, and if when I challenge you on it, and by challenge I mean in the helpful sort of a way, hey, how do you know that that's the case? You're positioning this statement as if it's true. How do you know that it's true? What's the basis for that? And you better be able to answer the question. And the reason is because if you can't, well, guess what? Everything else is going to be suspect. So step number one in is the RCA good? Is the evidence good? Is it built on a solid foundation? And so things like if you're showing me photos, if you're showing me video, if you're showing me the actual, say, the procedure, and you've got statements from people that are corroborated. In other words, more than one person came back with essentially the same story, or you've given me laboratory results, right? Like you've given me metallurgy results or environmental studies or things like that, and those come from a qualified laboratory. That's pretty good stuff. I don't know that it gets much better than that. But if you're giving me uncorroborated statements from people, even if experts are there, so if someone says, "Oh yeah, we hired Doctor So and So, and Doctor So and So came in here and they've been doing this for 30 years and they forgot more about this subject than I'll ever know. And so, yeah, we're really grateful to Dr. So and so." I've had a lot of those Dr. So and so's in my RCAs before, and they are great, and they're wrong sometimes. And that's why I think it's really important to get corroboration. Because if you have a single point of failure in your evidence structure, I'm going to sniff that out and I'm going to question that and not because because I've so often been, I was going to say misled. That seems like there's almost an intent to mislead, and that's never the case. But experts without corroboration, they are still human beings, and they are subject to all of the same kinds of things that other people are, which is they can be wrong. And so I think that one of the things that when you hear what a good RCA sounds like in the process, you hear a facilitator respectfully challenging expert opinion and asking for corroboration that'll back it up. And that's good stuff. That's next level. And those are the kinds of things that you do that really help you have confidence. So evidence first and foremost, whether I'm reading the report, whether I'm hearing the facilitator ask for it and drill in with a heavy level of professional skepticism that hey, we can't afford to be wrong here. When you're seeing the evidence, you got the pictures, you have the video, the diagrams, all of that good stuff that's there. That's the gold standard as far as I'm concerned. So evidence is a good place for us to start. My hop friends, so let me get on the other side of that coin for a second. One of my good buddies in the world of hop is Angie Baker. She's fantastic. You've heard me talk about her before. I have a lot of respect for her, and I just like her. She's good people. She'd be telling me right now, "You're totally full of it. You shouldn't be so focused on the evidence because, Brian, not that the evidence is wrong, but your interpretation of it has bias that you are going to have a hard time controlling." And the first time I heard her say that, I'm like, that's BS, Andy. I like you a lot, but I don't think I agree with that. But it's true. Evidence is perceived through my biases. And if I don't recognize and sort of question my own interpretation of what I think is good evidence, I feel like now that doesn't mean that I'm floating through space without any tether into reality, okay? But I'm also recognizing that sometimes the ground isn't so solid as I might imagine. And so my own biases are something that I need to be keenly aware of. And so corroboration is helpful for in that area too. So I think it's a combination of what Andy said, along with having high quality evidence. And you might say, oh man, you're spending a lot of time on this part of it. I'll tell you why. It's because if you walk in the room understanding bias, recognizing bias, playing heads up facilitation game about looking for bias in yourself and others, and you're looking for solid evidence, evidence that really shows that you're dealing in the world of fact. The rest of this actually goes much more smoothly. Okay, so I think that it's just so important. And also, you go ask any of our. I was just out and about. John Boisano and I were out, and we were with United last week. We were with Amazon last week, and we're going to be visiting with all of our top clients sometime in the first half of the year. Universally, what you hear from these folks is that where they could really do a lot better job is in the evidence. Okay, so I think I've pretty much beat this one to death. Good evidence means well, it doesn't mean good RCA, but bad evidence means bad RCA. Okay, so that's definitely, I think, a takeaway here. I'm going to shift now and talk about problem statement. Let me see here. I see Aaron get Bill Demchuk to bring. I'm gonna send, if you know Bill Demchuk, first off, you're very suspect. Okay, so I want to just say that. But if I see Bill Demchuk, I'm gonna give him a bag of groceries and I'm gonna put your name on the outside. And so hopefully I won't send any like homegrown tree fruit or any of that. I think I know better there, but I don't know. Will Canada let you bring it across? I don't know. Demchuk he'll smuggle it in probably. He'll stuff it up his shirt or something. Anyway, we'll talk about it later, Aaron. Let's talk about problem statement. And to talk about problem statement, the first thing that I look at is the focal point. Focal point is what we name, that's a Sologic term, and it's what we call the problem that we're looking at. Okay, so you got all of these. The way to sort of read this slide or to interpret this slide is that problems are the result of converging storylines. And those storylines originally might not have a lot to do with one another, but as time unfolds, they swirl together, they come together, and they converge on that point. And I think it's extremely important to look at the focal point that people define. What is that focal point? Is it too broad? Is it too narrow? Does it make sense in the context of what it is, the goal of the RCA or the learning effort? Why I think the focal point is so important is because, well, for one, you can't assume that everybody on your team believes that the problem is the same as each other. You might, and when you poll people on your team, you ask them all, what do you think the problem is? Each of them may say something different or slightly different. So one of the things that we do first and foremost, a good facilitation, if we're talking about what a good RCA sounds like, a good RCA sounds like a facilitator not taken for granted that everybody understands what the problem is and understands it the same way that they do. And so they ask the people on their team, what do you think the problem is? And it's okay to disagree with each other. If we don't all understand what the problem is and we're not all reconciled to what it is we're focusing on, well, then everything else that we do is going to be pretty difficult. So we're going to start there. And so focal points, then, is it too broad or is it too narrow? I got a good slide here for that. Whoa, that's bright compared to these dark slides so far, but all right. So, geez, where to start? Okay. Let me see if I can make the little laser beam show up. There it is. Good. All right, well, I've got a problem. Typically, the focal point is going to be that box that shows up on the far left-hand side. And note here that it says high workers' comp rates. Yeah, I think I don't know if that's universally, I don't know what Canada calls it, but workers' compensation rates. That means high insurance costs, right? Well, what's the problem? Oh, well, is that a fair problem? Sure, it is. If you want to know more about it, then that's the only definition, I guess. It's like, why are these worker comp rates so high? Perfectly fair question. And if you want to know why, then we're going to look at the causes of it. And in this case, the way that this is outlined or organized, we see that these high workers comp rates are the result of three recent injuries. And and let's say that the last period we didn't have these injuries. We didn't have injuries at this rate. We have these new injuries that came into, that happened over the period, and those resulted in us getting knocked for higher insurance rates. All right. So that's one way that I decide whether or not it's good or not, is whether it makes sense. Is this a relevant question? Yeah, looks good. Is it clearly stated? Yes, it is. It's not too much, it's not too little. I get it. Just from reading it, I get it. Oh, and let me just point this out. I used to I used to wonder, am I, in my perspective, a good yardstick for whether or not that's a good focal point? Like, who am I to decide? Well, I'm me. And if it makes sense to me, then yes, of course it's subjective, 100,000% subjective. But if I think it's good, then that's okay. I have to trust my shot. Why do I think it's good? Can I explain it to you? Sure. Because I can see what the subject is. In this case, we're talking about our workers. I can see that we're talking about the insurance rates. And then when I look one step to the right, I can see that these rates, that the major components of these high rates are these additional injuries. And look, it makes sense. It's organized. If I understand the causes of this strained back, and that strained back, and this torn right ACL, all three of those things, I'm going to get a lot of good information from that. And then ultimately, if I can find ways to help keep workers safe, then the idea there is that we're going to see lower rates. It makes sense to me. I might ask Michelle. Michelle, does that make sense to you? I was being rhetorical, but you can jump in if you want. But get somebody else's perspective on it. But I think overall this is pretty good. Now, in terms of scope, this is pretty big scope because you're looking at three different injuries. I personally like to make it easy on myself, and I'm going to eat one bite at a time. And so I personally would split these up. And I would want to analyze or look at the causes of this torn right ACL independently at first of that strained back. And I would want to look at this strained back independently from that strained back because I recognize that these are separate events. And I personally just like that level of separation. Um, and I would find that sort of I would find if I were asking somebody why they were approaching it this way and I heard that explanation, I would think that they were being rational about their own capacity person, that they're taking their own investigation capacity into account. They're not overloading themselves. They're doing this in a way that basically their investigation capacity can handle, and it would give me confidence. But we're talking about focal point here. Note that focal point for high workers' comp rates versus torn right ACL, I think those are, this one's a little narrower in scope, isn't it? Because, we're only looking at one instance versus three instances or even more. In reality, this would be actually quite a lot more complicated. It's simplified here. So I would be a little concerned if someone told me, hey, I'm doing a root cause analysis on high workers' comp rates. I'd say that's ambitious. And I would ask them some follow-up questions because the problem that I see is that they're trying to basically boil the ocean. They bite off more than they can chew. This is a common occurrence, especially with new investigators. And it's actually, to be honest, a common occurrence from the desire of certain leaders who maybe didn't take the training, but once they send, 25 or 50 people through the training courses, they're like, oh, we can solve, you're a seasoned expert at this point. It's not true. Okay, so I would caution against starting with something too large because it's always easier to add more to your plate than it is to basically cry uncle and say, geez, I'm just not going to be able to finish this. And you can see, especially with a new investigator, how that might make them frustrated. That might cause them to say, "Oh, this process is complex and hard, and I'm just going to go back to the old way of doing it," which is, in honesty, probably harder, but familiar, So you can see how that might cause them to backslide. Therefore, a good RCA starts with a healthy respect for what you're capable of accomplishing. And so I'm going to look at the focal point and I'm going to make that assessment. I do not want you to hear that it's not okay to start here with high comp rates. It is. It's just that if you're asking my feedback, I'm going to drill into that a little bit further to make sure that you know exactly what you're getting into. Because having been down this road a few times, I can kind of see some of the pitfalls that you're going to run into. Okay. So the other thing I want to just chat a little bit more about this. I didn't have a ton of slides on it, but focal point for sure. Did you take the time to document when, where, and what the impact was? Honestly, too many people don't do this. So if I'm going to look at your problem statement. If you send me an RCA or you ask me to log into your system and look at your RCA and give you feedback, I am going to absolutely look at the problem statement and I'm going to look at whether or not you filled it out at all. And then I'm going to look more at what exactly you put in there. And when and where I find that just doesn't take very long to do it. And if you've taken the time to do your when and your where, and then what it means to me is it shows that you respect your reader enough to give them some information so that they can put this into context. Impact is a little harder, I'll grant you that. So doing impact assessments, there's the actual impact. We want to document that, but then there's the potential impact. If you have done a good, thoughtful job on assessing your impact, then that's going to win you a lot of kudos from me. Because again, it's like, it feels like you're taking me, the reader, into account as you're doing your work. The truth is that before I ever get a chance to read it, your RCA is going to benefit from you taking a couple of minutes and documenting this information because everybody's going to be going into the actual analysis, which is the cause and effect chart, which is where we're going to go to next, and which is where everybody wants to jump right into. But if you do those precursors, evidence, problem statement, yes, it takes a couple extra minutes, okay? And I know you want to just jump into building the chart. And sometimes I even say I do too, but at the same time, it certainly, those precursor steps are extremely important. Okay. So I don't see any questions. Michelle, any questions or comments?
Not so far.
Hmm. Well, hopefully it's making sense. Okay, so then building the cause and effect chart. Holy mackerel, this is tough because boy, I could be super opinionated about this, but I'm not. I've learned to sort of relax a little bit. Okay, so let's start out with question one. Is there a right way to do it? Yes. There is. I mean, we present a way of building cause and effect logic. And here's what the logic looks like. It looks like analyzing causes that come together to create effects. There are always more than one cause for every given effect. And some of these things you could even argue with me, and it gets a little tiresome, but I'll go through it. Well, water in the container here, let me back up for those that aren't familiar with our process. This is an event of spilled water. The water was spilled because I tipped over the container. Well, every time I tip a container over, I don't necessarily get spilled water, right? So I also have to have water in the container because I think it's pretty obvious that if I tip over an empty container, I don't spill any water. So the water is critical to this. Now, it's also true that that water has to have a way of coming out of the container. And so I'm going to define that as opening at the top of the container. Now, tipping the container over is what most people would consider a classic cause. It's like an action. We call it a transitory cause because it's a point of change. And so whatever, if that word means something to you, then that's great. I like it. It's precise, but I also recognize it's a little awkward. So if you like action or whatever else, I totally get that, and I'm not going to argue with you about it. But with the argument that I do get into and have even most recently, and it's just it's amazing how much air people spend on this argument when it kind of doesn't matter. But it's like, well, water in the container, that's not a cause of anything. That's a condition. Okay, fine. Don't call it. I don't care what you label it. You have you if you're trying to tell me though that you can spill water without water being in whatever it was that got knocked over, well, then that's not going to fly, is it? I mean, that, and so whether we label it a cause or whether we label it a condition or whatever, I'm not going to get involved in the semantics because I just have seen that there's just too much wind that gets wasted there. What I'm looking for here is not even so much that you're labeling them, okay? Although big kudos to those that do because it does show an advanced level of understanding of cause and effect. But here's where I'm gonna get happy just by seeing that you have multiple causes coming together, because for me, that is a green shoot or a baby step towards a more advanced cause and effect logic thinking. If you just have a single cause after your focal point, you're suspect. And I'm going to dig into that a little bit deeper, okay? Because there, I can always find another one. I can always find two or three, or honestly, so
So we have a question.
yeah, what do we see here?
Aaron did ask, I sometimes find that investigators are pressed into a path of they know what happened, or they take bites too big, or they
Yeah.
have insufficient evidence. Thoughts on how to avoid these pitfalls. And we
Yeah,
also
just
have Susan, who would reassure you that this great stuff.
oh, I see that, Susan. Yeah, thanks, bud. So yeah, okay, investigators are pressed into a path or they know what happened. Yeah, for sure. This is classic, sort of a preconceived, you walk into the RCA, I know what happened here, or the boss says, well, we already really know what happened here. So the RCA, and then really the RCA becomes a formality at that point. Man, I got so many problems with that. And that means that you're doing RCA for compliance, not because you're trying to learn. It's not you put that in somebody's face like that and they often are like they get defensive. They're like, no, I want to learn about it. It's like, no, you don't. All you want to do is get done with it. Okay. And you're walking in here, you got it all figured out already. In other words, the RCA is documenting what you already know. I have never done an RCA where I didn't have an idea of what I thought happened and then have that idea kind of turned on its head. I am 100% confident that there is always more to know. So when somebody does what Aaron's talking about here, and it's pretty apparent that it's like, listen, you're treating this as a formality or as a compliance effort, not saying that I don't respect the fact that there are musts that must be done in this world, and RCA is one of those. But you're going to hear counseling from me that RCA, yes, it has to be done, but it's not only that it has to be done, it should be done because we have an opportunity to learn. Okay, so that's Aaron, where I would take that. The conversation could go a variety of different ways, but I would have that conversation with the boss too. It's you do it a little differently, right? It's, you got to be respectful, you got to be careful. If they got insufficient evidence, I just call them out on it. I don't try to ever make somebody feel stupid. I don't want to belittle anybody, and I never, never, never want to make somebody feel inferior, so that I can feel superior. You know what I'm saying? Like, so how you say it is extremely important. You have to bring in all the human and organizational performance models there in order to make sure that your feedback, while pointing out an opportunity for improvement, is perceived as being helpful and not hurtful, because you can do more damage than good if you're not extremely careful with it. So that's what I would do around those, and we could talk about it a little bit more. But yeah, so I'm usually coming at it from, hey, I'm doing this to help you out here. I think you're missing something, or I think this could be there's a nuance here that I think that we could tease out a little bit further. And you know what? Usually that's accepted. So here I got Susan. Oh,
Yeah, we have
Sarah.
two questions.
Yeah.
So one is, are there any problem that could come up if we just only had causes and nothing labeled condition? And then Susan followed up with, how do you handle it when your management says they only want one cause?
Yeah. Okay, let's answer both those questions. Those are very similar to each other. Okay, I'm going to jump up here to this. So here I've got an example. Okay, so and I've got Sarah. I see Sarah's question and Susan's question, and so I'm gonna read the example first, and then I'm going to answer both questions at the same time. Two workers are carrying a 12-foot long 8 by 8 laminated wooden beam across the shop from the glue jig to a different work area so it can be cut to length and sanded prior to having finish applied. The workers were focused specifically on moving the beam, so they weren't watching closely where they were stepping. The injured worker said he didn't see a cordless drill laying on the shop floor. He stepped on the drill, his right knee twisted, he felt a pop, his knee felt unstable, and he was in a lot of pain. He was taken to a medical facility where they found out that he tore his ACL, which resulted in a recordable injury. All right, so you often are presented with a story like this. And then you're presented with the story, and it's like, okay, well, it was a recordable injury. Therefore, I am required to do an RCA. All right, so we got the compliance thing coming into play here. And then let's look at Susan's question first. Are there problems that could come up if we only had causes and nothing labeled condition? Okay, and so here, Susan or Sarah, I'm sorry, I got Sarah and Susan confused maybe, but Sarah, here's how one for one looks like. It's like straightforward 5 Ys RCA. Recordable injury, torn right ACL. That's our focal point. No problem there. I'm good so far. Well, why did that happen? Because the right knee twisted. All right, okay, no problem. That did occur, and that did result in the torn ACL. So I'm okay so far. And that was because why did his knee twist? Well, that's because he stepped on the drill. Okay, well, why did he step on the drill? Because he didn't see the drill laying on the floor. Why? Because he wasn't watching where he was stepping, because he was focusing on his task, wasn't aware of the drill. Okay, so what I've done here is primarily listed what I would call transitory causes: right knee twisted, stepped on cordless drill, did not see, was not watching, focusing on the task. In other words, you've got, and the way that I do that is I'm looking at noun verb statements. Noun verb, noun verb. In this case, it's like the opposite because he did not see something, but it's still the same formula format there. And so I would consider all these either actions or inactions. I did not see. That's a little bit of a weird concept, but you kind of have to take my word on it. But so you get these one for one cause and effect relationships without understanding anything else that goes on here. I would say that this is both right and incomplete. Okay, so what's there isn't wrong. It's just that it's not all there. It's like serving dinner and you got the vegetables on the plate, but there's no protein, right? So where's the rest of it? And so I'm going to get to that in a second. So now I want to talk about with Susan's question. How do you handle it when your management says they only want one cause? Well, you know what, Susan, a lot of, and this, I got in this argument on LinkedIn. I don't want to say, I try not to be, I try not to get in arguments because I think they're ridiculous. But I wasn't going to back down from it. This guy is kind of coming at me with the same thing. And man, there are so many cases where you could walk into an RCA report out. You get your director there, and they're like, hey, torn ACL a couple of days ago, did you guys come up with the root cause for that? And you'd say, yeah, you know what, you got inattention. Really, it was inattention to his surroundings. He was unaware of his surroundings, because he said he was focusing on what he was doing, but he wasn't really aware of the hazard that was there, in this case a cordless drill. And the boss would say, yeah, that probably makes a lot of sense. These guys got to pay more attention out there. And I've always known that that's the case. I mean, I see it all the time. I tell them all the time, guys, it's a dangerous place, you got to pay attention and all that. So I'm not surprised that that's the case. Next, right? So then they've like accepted that. And yeah, it's just not okay. It's not okay. So I had an article published. Michelle got me the opportunity. Michelle gets the credit. But the for the publishing part of it, and it was in Quality Digest a couple of days ago. And one commenter on there, man, she was pissed at me. She was like, "This is I've been using 5 watts." This is not her voice. Don't get me. I shouldn't do that. That's not really respectful, but that's the voice I heard when I read it. I've been
I
doing.
read the comment too. I wasn't
You
sure
did,
if I
right?
should flag it to you.
Oh, I replied to it. You should read my
Oh,
reply.
I see.
I was like, "You don't know what you're talking about, you stupid idiot." No, wait a minute. I didn't say that. I'm sorry. I was very respectful, Michelle. We can go through it after the webinar. Anyway, so they were they were basically saying, look, I've used 5 whys my whole career. I'm very good at it. Your article, which kind of put this, I was saying it's not enough. My article was kind of flying in the face of what this one person had found successful. And in my comment, Michelle, you'll see that I acknowledge that, you know what, I'm not gonna argue that you haven't found success with 5 whys. And if you have, then I applaud your efforts, and I really do. If you found a way to make it work and it's useful and you've made a career out of that, then that's fantastic. But most people don't. And honestly, even if like there's always more than one, I would guess that any successful RCA that someone did with 5 whys, when you dig into it, what you found is they called it a 5 whys, but they ended up going a lot further, so because really it's just incomplete, however you dice it. And that's just an objective fact. And here, let me dig a little further. I really like this example, and I'm also being mindful of the time. So a good RCA, let's bring this into the context of what we're talking about here. If someone shows me 5 whys, I immediately say that is not going, that's might be a good start, and we're not going to stop there. I don't like I, I'd say it more respectfully than what I just did, but I know that there's more to it than that. And so like in this case, this initial 5 whys, here's the problem. Someone else might say that is absolutely not the right answer. The right answer is that they're carrying a huge beam across the shop floor. And I've told those guys about this. If he wasn't carrying that great big beam, then he would be able to see better. He would have seen the drill, wouldn't have stepped on it, none of this would have happened. This is also right. Okay. There's nothing wrong about this. And there's nothing wrong about this. But what happens is that when you believe in single root causes, now you get an argument, don't you, about which one is the rootier cause. That's not going to be a good RCA. There's another one. You guys are both wrong. You guys are stupid. No, maybe not that. But you're gonna think it. It's like, oh, those guys, they're arguing about this. They don't know what the hell they're doing. The problem is that this place is a freaking mess. We're running around like a bunch of chickens with our heads cut off because we're backed up on all these jobs. And until we get some more help around here, people are going to keep getting hurt because they're rushing. Therefore, they didn't clear the pathway. Therefore, the drill was laying right there to step on it, and then you got a guy hurt. All right. So this is the problem with single pathway causal analysis, is that you can have all of these quote unquote right answers, but the thing is not complete. And that's why it's imperative that you get into the multiple cause analysis. Each of these each of these is actually incorporated in the multiple cause analysis. And I'm going to tell you what a good root cause analysis looks like. It's a lot more like this. Right knee twisted along with sufficient force to tear, which is why they tore the ACL. You might say to yourself, sufficient force? Well, of course there had to be sufficient force. I don't need to analyze that. It's like, okay, well, of course the right knee had to twist as well, but we're going to analyze that one. So why would we analyze this one and not this one? Well, we would. Okay. So we want to dig into the force as well. When we get down to it, you look at the carrying a 100-pound beam, they got the worker's weight plus the beam weight, and you got drill laying in the shop floor. You got the fact that they're rushing, they're backed up on all these jobs. They're carrying these great big beams around. They are, they're leaving stuff laying on the shop floor. All of this context is imperative to understand what happened. And if you don't understand the context, and this is for my hop friends, if you don't understand the context, then the actions are that actions can't take place outside of context. And a lot of times context is where you find the solutions. Okay. So I do have a neat slide for that. And so I'm getting a little farther away from the subject, but I'm going to bring it back in.
And I just want to remind that we have 5 minutes to the
5 minutes
webinar,
left.
so let's leave a little room for questions as well.
Okay, bud, let's do it. I'll get to it. This is just a big subject, so let me see if I can wrap this up. If I see that someone's causal analysis shows that a level of sophistication where they're looking at multiple causes, and those causes include context along with the specifics, I'm gonna like that. Okay, I am, because I know that they're gonna come up with multiple solutions. That's the other thing, is I don't want to see single solutions. I want to see a bunch. I want to see at least five, okay, honestly, if not more. Now, they don't have to do all of those, but I want to see that they're thinking about it. And I want to see that they are looking for not only the reminders and the signs and the training and the easy stuff that doesn't cost anything. I want to see that they're thinking outside of the box and they're looking for engineering type solutions, substitution solutions, elimination solutions. I want to see that they're challenging their teams. I want to hear that they're challenging their teams, and then I want to read about it in the report. Okay, so I want to just share to you just real briefly, and then we can take questions so you can think about what your questions are. I do have, there's a neat tool here, and I'm happy to share it with you, a critical review guide. Now, this is an Excel worksheet, but we go through all of the different elements, and you've got your perfect score and then your actual score. And so it gives you a way of kind of scoring if you're providing objective, consistent feedback. Happy to share this with any of you guys, and you can change it up. You can do whatever you want with it, but the scores add up to 100. And so if you got a perfect on all areas, well, then you would have no deviation. But then when you do see deviations, well, you can provide feedback to people and show them how to, and show them, basically give them feedback so that they can go in there and do a better job, right? So this is a good way to help sort of codify what you think is good and what wasn't. All right, so I see that Susan wants to share the file. It's no problem, you can have it. And I don't know that I can't share it through here, but here's what I'll do. I'll post it in the blog. I'll post a link to it in the blog entry, and I'll find a way to share it with you that way. And but questions, comments, concerns? Bob, great checklist. Yeah, no problem, buddy. Excel copy from Mandy. Yeah, okay. Here's what I'll do. Everybody that attended, I'm just going to send you an email afterwards. It's so much easier just to put it as an attachment. So
Yep.
happy to do it.
So we typically send out a recording on the Monday after to everyone who's registered. We'll
That's right.
also share the Excel file. And then in the chat box just now, I also shared a link to our example problems that we publish
Right.
and update almost every quarter, if not, every once in a while. And that's just giving everyone more references to what we consider a comprehensive RCA. And in the same module, you'll also see blog entries written and updated by Brian regularly.
Yeah, I'm gonna write this up. So we literally take the transcript from this, and then I'll use it as a basis for the blog entry, along with there's some stuff I didn't say because I ran out of time. But I'll put that all in there too. And also, okay, so remember, if you want us to do this internally, just let us know. Those are free. Unless you want me to come on site, then I'm gonna maybe charge you. But webinars like this are free to do. And also, I got a minute. Can I show real quick, Michelle? I'm so pleased with this. I think this is cool. And okay, so here we are on our website, and I'm going to go to resources, blog. And one thing that I've been doing, here's the one from last time, managing human error. Where were you guys last week? I didn't have as many people. So anyway, so here's the blog. All right. But then at the bottom, we're also including it in white paper format. This is a neat application called Flipping Book, right? So you can kind of flip through. But what I like about it is that you can download it. It's not branded. It's just on, this is literally our letterhead. If we sent you a letter, it would look like this. And so the point isn't to be all flashy and brandy and, Sologic's this and that and the other thing. It's to take the information that's there. You can hit the download button and dig it. It downloads, and once you do that, you can share it internally. And the whole point behind that is to share relevant, valuable information. And I'm going to do that with every blog entry and our content. And Michelle, we are on track for publishing on schedule. It's not like we only do it every once in a, like, no, we're not hoping, we're publishing. We even have all the examples ready to go. I think Katie has 5 that are ready to publish. I think we're good. So okay, y'all. Oh, someone, Shelly. Hey, check it out, Michelle. Look at Shelly Cordier. She says, my response on Quality Digest was very respectful and appropriate. She says, huh?
Good, good. All right, everyone, thank you for attending our
Oh,
webinar.
Michelle.
Uh-huh.
Mandy has her hand raised. Mandy Knight. Mandy, do you want to ask a question, or we can close the webinar, or we can stay on if you want to chat. We can like officially end it. Go ahead, Michelle. Say what you're going to say. And if Mandy wants to stick around, then she will, and we'll let her talk.
Okay, all right. Well, I just wanted to mention that we also have RCA workshops that we host virtually and in person. So check out our public course site link if you want a more intensive deep dive.
That's right. Right here, huh? Look at this training. Public. My goodness. All right. Thanks so much, everybody. We'll catch you around. Okay. Okay. Oh, Mandy's good. Yeah, great. Okay, y'all. You take care, everybody. Stay in touch, everybody. We'll see you around. Okay. How do I end it, Michelle? Oh my goodness. I always am hunting for the end sign. There it is.